It's not even profitable to like do a property development anymore. Basically, I got to pay stamp duty, and then I got to pay land tax, GST. Then I have to pay all these structure costs. All right, we have lost Senthin this time round, but we've got 2 new additions for the Accountants After Dark. And today we're talking about something very special. It's called the federal budget. The federal budget was released on the 14th of May, and I was actually there at the parliament and then talking to very up there politicians. I can't really give you guys too much information, and then we learned more about what the federal budget was for and what the aim was it. And what I learned from the treasurer was that the 3 main aims for the federal budget this year was to target inflation, to reduce and minimize inflation, deal with the cost of living, and ensure that the budget was in a surplus, and basically they're trying to repair the budget. So that could mean a lot of things. A lot of people don't really understand why a budget goes into surplus and deficit. But what do you guys think about that? By the way, I should introduce you guys. I'm sure everyone knows who these people are, but that's Sean and that's Molly. So what do you guys think about the federal budget? You guys done much research on it?
I think just from a very broad overview of the federal budget, it looks like it's very catered towards the individuals, and it's not very catered towards businesses. And as we're in small business accounting, so we see how clients right now, they're really struggling. The ATO is going really hard on small business owners. They're coming after overdue debt. Everything that has brought over from COVID now is accentuated. And personally, I feel like there's a little bit of lack of support in terms of the small business community. Yeah,
I definitely think that there has been a massive lack of support. But I do also believe that it's part of the natural growth of businesses that to go start as well as finish up. And I think there was like a term where the ATO was creating zombie companies, which is basically, they gave everyone grants during COVID. And then what happened was that these companies probably should have went under, but they didn't go under. And now they dragged out to 2024, and a lot of companies are going under now, and there's a huge amount of debt that's owed to the ATO, and hence why the ATO is putting people into notice, giving people notices, as well as then chasing them for penalties and tax lodgements and debt and stuff like that. But I do agree, the ATO's stance right now is a lot harder on small businesses, unfortunately. Yeah, what do you think, Molly?
I had a brief look at this year's federal budget. Comparing to previous years, I think there's not much tax implications. As a tax accountant, I will look at more what the tax impacts for our clients and our small business clients are. Like Sean mentioned, I think there are some changes that impact overall with housing crisis and other matters, but not very so much impactful for taxes or changes, I have to say, this year. But I think we'll go through that.
Do you guys actually understand what the federal budget, what the whole point of the federal budget is?
The way I see it is that the government has a sort of in economics, they have the invisible hand, but the government has their own hand, right? And then they meddle with where resource should be allocated. So the way I see economics is that there's always a limited amount of people, and the people work and create value in the economy. And then as they create value, the aim of value creation is to make people's life more comfortable and more convenient, and obviously to enable people to continue surviving, humankind to continue surviving. So with the federal budget, it's really the government being able to sort of see, okay, where are the biggest problems in the society, and how do we help eliminate or alleviate these problems?
I see it's just any other businesses, right? You just forecasting how you're going to use your income and where you're going to allocate the resources and expenses within the industry, or which area you think, sort of Sean touched base on, which area that needs a bit more support in terms of government support, whether it comes in, whether it's more tax cuttings, or whether it's more in supporting small business, or whether it's supporting in a community. So basically, the government is coming up with all these percentages and ratio of how they're going to allocate their income for the rest of the year.
Yeah, so basically the federal budget is part of 2 policies that the government has. There's the monetary policy and the fiscal policy. I learned this in economics, guys, back in the day. But that's basically their instruments on being able to control the economy, to ensure that the economy grows, as well as protect the economy in specific ways. Obviously, they spend money on defense, health, which doesn't really help the economy in terms of money and GDP. but it helps protect the economy in other ways indirectly. And so they use those tools. And the cool thing about it is that those tools aren't together. Like there is not one government that manages the fiscal policy as well as the monetary policy. And just so the viewers out there, the monetary policy is the interest rates, like the changing of interest rates for RBA. So interest rates controlled by increasing or reducing interest rates. If the interest rates is high, then they're trying to contract the economy. And if they're reducing interest rates, they're trying to allow money to be cheap so people will borrow more. So therefore it expands the economy. The federal budget is the same. So the way the federal budget works is they collect taxes, multiple different ways of collecting taxes by the government. And once they collect the money, they will then tally up how they're going to spend it on certain places of the economy to help expand that part of the economy. And then as a result, if you spend more than you actually have, then they're trying to, expand the economy. And in this case, in this federal budget, the federal budget's in a surplus, which means that they're collecting more income and not spending all of it, which is a good thing and a bad thing. Good for inflation, which means that they're not spending more money on the economy. There's less money in the economy, so therefore inflation shouldn't go up. But if they just give free money out there, inflation can still go up even though there's a federal budget surplus. So yeah, that's the general gist of how it works. Or that's how I think it works anyway. In this case, I don't think it has been that interesting, this federal budget. I think it's actually been very boring. Probably the most boring federal budget I've seen in a very long time. Gone are the days of COVID where our
JobKeeper and JobSeeker was there.
Scott Morrison just went, I don't know what he did, but basically I've never seen anyone just give money out like that before in my whole life. Like it was the most exciting budget I've ever seen in my life. And then from then onwards, like literally after the federal budget got released, I got multiple calls every single day about the changes in federal budget back then in I think it was 2020 or 2021. But 2020, 2021, basically there were so many things that were happening that we constantly got calls and things weren't even put into parliament and legislature already. And people were asking questions on when am I going to get my money? When am I going to get JobKeeper? When am I going to get these grants? And it was a really exciting time. However, it's been about 4 years since then and it is, dried out. But let's go right into it. Let's see what you guys think about it. So obviously we're accountants. So we should firstly talk about the tax implications of this federal budget. So just to let you guys know, the federal budget, let me just go right into it. I believe there were winners and losers. And what do you guys think? This taxpayer changes, the tax rate changes. There hasn't really been any updates. Like for example, this federal budget had anything new that's happened. What I mean by that, they've already released these tax cuts previously. So they only just saying that, nothing's new. We've already told you guys about this, but they've changed the stage 3 tax cuts and they've delivered a saving of up to about $4,500 per annum for both those in the highest tax bracket from 1st of July this year. And the average taxpayer will save about $1,800 a year. And obviously the brackets have increased a bit. So from, I believe $120,000 is going to $135,000 and the $180K is going to up to $190K. What do you guys think about that?
I was going to say that, this tax cut doesn't really make that much of an impact in comparison to the initial stage 3 tax cuts that was released. That was supposed to be going to be a bigger deal. And it was definitely define what stage 3 tax cuts mean because it was really helping and targeting people who are in stage 3 tax cut brackets. Right now, rather than, even though they are calling it stage 3 tax cut, I feel that my perspective is that they're trying to still help everyone within all stages tax cut. So the stage 3, the people in a stage 3 marginal tax rate, they're not really getting that much of a beneficial because instead of they getting still allocated with the tax cuts like with the other stages.
Yeah, so basically in stage 1, stage 2, it was more tailored towards the low to medium income taxpayers, whereas stage 3 was more for the high income. But then what they did was, obviously, I believe the Morrison government got voted out. So as a result of that, they changed the goal where it's like, let's give the stage 3 tax cuts more to, the lower income and they spread it amongst, all the taxpayers rather than just giving it only to the high income earners. I think that's a pretty smart idea for politics. As a result, the stage 3 tax cuts wasn't as, beneficial for, the high income earners, unfortunately. What do you think?
I think that's one point. And the second point I want to make is that I feel like the changes of the bracket, it's not so much just the changes on the tax rates, but the changes on the tax brackets has not changed enough to curb inflation. So, we had COVID grants, we had JobKeeper, all this cash flow boost, so much money going into the economy.
Sorry, do you mean inflation or do you mean cost of living?
So what I'm talking about is the bracket. So we had...
but does it curb inflation? inflation or curb cost of living?
So what I'm saying is that because the value of money has reduced due to the increase in cash flow in the economy, therefore the changes in the tax brackets is not significant enough. That's my opinion. Because if you take, like, let's say the inflation rate back then is anywhere between 5% or even more before they tried curbing the inflation rate, then if you take that and you compound it over time, the previous tax brackets were changed in 2020 to 2021, if I'm not mistaken. And if you compound it over time to what it is right now, you will realize that that's actually a difference between what the changes in the tax, that's significant understatement of the changes in the tax brackets versus what the actual value of the same dollar is right now.
Yeah, but I get ya. But I just FYI, just to explain, I think the way taxes work, if you reduce the amount of taxes, and then that means you have more income, more money to spend, that would, as a result of that should increase the inflation rate because you have more money to spend, and so therefore people are spending more, the prices will increase. That's normally how it works. But I think the whole point of reducing the taxes and increasing the budget is not for inflation. It actually causes a negative impact on inflation, because negative impact meaning inflation goes up, prices goes up, but it does give you the, like, well, it's supposed to help the cost of living, which is like give more money to the people that spending more. That's the whole point of it.
So if, let's say, you're talking about like giving people more for the cost of living, I mean, that's kind of the same thing as giving people more money and then like accentuating
I think that's why they try not to make that much tax cut for high income earners, where people already would be having sufficient money to live
to spend more.
and have the necessary needs. So then when there's more tax cut for them, they're just going to spend more, which would then derive more high inflation.
Yeah, that's why it was like a kind of like a double-edged sword. Like, you give too much money out to people, you do too much tax cuts. As a result of that, people have more money, then they'll spend more, and then inflation will go up, and then prices will go higher. And it happened with the Scott Morrison government, where they gave so much money out for JobKeeper, and so people use that money and put down a deposit basically for a house, or renovated their property. And as a result, housing prices have went up during COVID when it shouldn't have. People were like, why is it going up when we should be at the whole economy is locked down? So I think you got it right when it comes to cost of living. But yeah, inflation going up is supposedly a bad thing. And I guess the reason a lot of people don't understand why inflation going up is a bad thing. Inflation going up by 3% is a good thing. That's the target, right? That's what the government wants. But if it goes up by 8% or 10%, everyone's seen what happens. Basically, pricing, like exactly what you said, that pricing has gone up so much that the money that you've made, your wage increase, or the money that you're currently making just won't allow you to buy what you used to be able to buy. And as a result, it devalues your income, basically. So it causes a negative impact on your income, and then as a result affects your cost of living.
It also affects negatively in our currency value as well.
Yes, yeah. So people don't want to invest to Australia anymore. So it's like very, very hard as a government to try to manage both. It's very, very difficult. And that's why I felt like the government was not trying to give too much to the high income earners, because if you give too much to the high income earners, obviously they'll spend the money, and then as a result, inflation will just go higher. However, I felt like I don't think the definition of a high income earner nowadays is like anyone that makes up to around 100 to 150k anymore. I think
no, it should be like over 250k. I would say.
I think that's norm now.
Yeah, that's norm now.
It's quite ridiculous. What do you think?
Sitting at the lower income tax bracket.
I knew you had something to say.
I didn't know whether, statistically, just science-based, the average income for an Australian is, I think, 63,000.
63? Yeah. Which makes no sense, because I remember how we did the maths on it. For someone to make 65k a year, they basically couldn't afford to even save up for a deposit. I think we worked out their budget and was going to go into negative, basically. You'll basically have to move back home, live with your parents, and in your situations, in certain situations, you can't even go back home. There is no home, right?
Yeah. So I think to sort of have a few pointers about what we've just talked about. Firstly, we talked about the most important thing is the housing crisis, where rent is very expensive. Just to get a mortgage, just to put a down payment on a property it's really, really difficult. Back then you did a calculation, Davie, that it'll take about 30 years, is that right?
For what?
To put down a down payment?
It depends on how much you earn, but $100,000 in income a year, it would take you 17 years, I think it was.
17 years?
Yeah. But then by that time, the housing prices would have either doubled or tripled.
17 years without taking into the effects of compounding inflation and all these kind of
Yeah,
things.
and wage increase, yeah.
Yeah, and wage increases. So just very simplistically, 17 years without compounding. But then the second thing is we talked about inflation, which is just not just to do with housing, but with everything else. And I think that the way to curb inflation, the most effective way, is to actually help businesses create more value. And that's something that I haven't really seen in the budget right now. And we can go through the rest of what the rest of the budget is later on. But using interest rates and using fiscal policies is like using a very blunt tool to fix specific problems that we have in our economy right now.
Yeah, it's hard for, well, the fiscal policy can target specific parts of a economy. Like, yeah, for medical, for example, defense, health, property. And I guess like, before I jump into the other parts in cost of living, I think that's a really major thing. The only thing, well, the last two things that really impacted taxes for this federal budget is they decided to keep the small business $20,000 instant asset write-off, extended it for another 12 months. What are you guys laughing for?
Is that news?
So that's been around for like 5+ years at least.
Yeah.
And I think lowest it was at 20,000. At its highest, there was no limit, right? Yeah. So during COVID days, there was no limit. You could buy basically any type of asset for the business and you can write the whole thing off. And I was just talking to clients. I'm like, do you guys enjoy art? Because if you purchase art for $1 million, supposedly the whole thing is written off for the whole year, and you get to claim the whole thing, like basically.
Right.
Yeah. But anyway, not many people were into art at that time, so yeah, basically no one could claim, or none of my clients purchased art that I know of. But yes, $20,000 instant asset write-off extended. There was talks that it was supposed to be $30,000, but they scrapped that because $10,000 is too high for them. You know, extra $10,000, which is ridiculous, right? I think these days you can't even buy a car for under $20,000. You know, they should at least increase it to $30,000, I believe. And the last thing they did was that they are making changes to the foreign resident capital gains tax. So amendments will apply to CGT events commencing from 1st of July 2025. Basically, they will broaden types of assets for foreign residents that are subject to CGT. Basically, back then it was just property, but now if there's assets, other asset classes may be taxed as well for foreign residents. So yeah, if you owned an asset in Australia and you were a foreign resident, you would have to pay tax on that capital gain. Now they're saying that if it's another asset, they haven't really gone into specifics, but I think it's like shares, they may tax that as well.
So if anyone owns shares in ASX, that means then they'll be taxed at the foreign income tax bracket.
Yeah, possibly. There's not much specifics about it, but they say that they're making changes to that, and that could be disastrous. I guess the last thing I could probably add in is super. They also limiting people that have $3 million in their super fund. Initially, you get a tax of 15%, but if you go over $3 million now, you're going to get taxed at 30%, which is quite big for high income earners.
So is it just going to be above the threshold of $3 million to be taxed at 30%? Or is it going to be a blanket rule of the entire fund could be taxed at 30%?
I think it must be over.
Detail.
It must be over. Sorry. Yeah. No, it is over. So basically, over the $3 million gets taxed at 30%. And they probably proportion it. So basically, you know, they work out, you know, how much your income is, and then whatever percentage that you're over, then they take that proportion and tax it at 30% rather than 15%. So I think that's really big. I think I heard judges complaining about it. Judges in Australia were like revolting about it because, like, you know, they have a lot of money in super because the income is quite high, so therefore a lot of money gets stuck into super. And I believe that eventually when they decide to retire, they live off that money, so they weren't happy about that. Yeah, so that's the taxes. And then I guess the next thing that which is the biggest deal is the cost of living. Like that was the whole point I thought the federal budget was going to be based on. So there are cost of living and then there's the housing crisis, right? I think they both melded together. Obviously, housing crisis is basically the fact that, you know, wage increasing at a slower rate than the housing increase rate. So houses are just a lot more expensive than our wages right now. And so the government announced that they're going to build 1.2 million homes over the next 5 years, which equates to $240,000 a year of property. However, I just want to let you guys know that the Masters Building Australia chief economist Shane Garrett basically said that over the year to February, in the last 8 months, he basically said that only 163,000 new homes received approvals across Australia. So not even built, just approvals. Yeah, to build. And that's the lowest in 11 years. So they're saying that the government isn't really approving enough homes fast enough, or the fact that no one wants to build a new home. And so that 240,000 new homes under the National Housing Accord that the government is trying to implement, that target, they think it's highly unachievable. The reason why they want to build more homes is the fact that they think that the economy has a undersupply of houses, new homes. And because I think there was multiple reasons. We did some research on it. It was because of immigration, population growth, rising cost of materials. And I think that's really a big deal that the government's trying to implement, saying that we're going to build more homes. And this is our target.
So in terms of building more homes and policies like that, we can look at a country like Singapore to actually see what a really efficient housing policy is. So in Singapore, they have these, it's almost like social housing, but what you have to do is that each couple, they would have to get married, and then they have to be below a certain age range, right? And then when they're below that age range, then they can apply for these social housings, and these social housings are really, really cheap. And then you can only get it for your first house, and then you need to, and then the loan on the property will be cheap as well.
Oh, so the government kind of builds these homes for you, and then they sell it to you?
I'm not sure whether the government owns those homes. I think they do.
Or they subsidize the homes?
They subsidize the homes, yeah, and then they ensure that only first home buyers, only couples could, new couples who are married, could purchase those homes. So that really, really targets do
you have to have a kid first before you?
No, you just have to get married. So my friends in Singapore, they literally get married.
Okay.
To get these homes.
Friends, are they actually in a relationship?
No, they are.
Oh, because I'm just curious.
And then another important fact of the policy is that you can't sell the property within X amount of years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that people don't keep on making profit and keep churning the properties.
Yeah. So
That makes sense.
it's quite a number of years. It's I think from memory something like 5 years. I'm not exactly sure. But
for Singapore, right, I think it took them time to get there when the supply is ready.
Yeah.
For us, the issue here is that, okay, there's not enough supply, and probably not a lot of construction companies or builders want to take on the projects, even from government projects, because they probably believe that it's starting to be not profitable.
Oh, no, that's a very good point. So actually, I was having lunch with one of our clients, and the client was saying to us that it's not even profitable to do a property development anymore. Basically, I got to pay stamp duty, and then I got to pay land tax, and then I got to pay all
GST.
these, GST, and that takes up and then he said, then I have to pay all these structure costs, sewage and all these things that I have to, fork out even more. And he says that it turns out that the government basically takes more than 60% of the profit. In terms of the budget, it's more than 60%. So I'm only left with, less than 5%, or sometimes I'm in a deficit. I'm not even making money out of it because the government takes 60%. I was like, how does that make any sense? How did you get 60%? And he's like, look, Davie, so you've got GST, that's 10%. Then you've got stamp duty, and that's 2 to 3% of the total value. Then you've got land tax, which is 1.6%. Then you've got stamp duty again when you sell it. So you have the buyer pays for it, but they factor that into the value of the home. So it's they won't spend more. If they didn't have to pay stamp duty, they would spend more, for example.
They will have a more budget.
Yeah.
So, and if it's a bigger developer, then they have payroll tax as well.
Yeah, payroll tax, and then they have to pay 25% to 30% of their income tax on the profit as well. Yep. So it's what are we left with? Seriously, yeah. And so I was like, man, when I did the calculation in my head, I'm like, actually, it does equate to over 60% of the budget. And I was like, holy shit.
It's a lot of taxes.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And I think that's the biggest problem right now, that the government is saying that, hey, we're going to target the build, 240,000 homes per year. However, builders don't want to build anymore.
They could be focusing on the wrong thing, in a sense that they're focusing on not the supply, but they're focusing on demand. So they're trying to help individuals, but they're not focusing on creating more supply and helping builders, developers actually take actionable steps to create more houses.
In businesses.
Yeah. Well, they announced that they're going to do it. We just haven't yet seen any action in place to be able to do it. So that's the biggest problem with the housing crisis right now.
And the budget hasn't really reflected on how, they're going to help developers and builders to reduce the taxes.
Yeah, we need
100%.
to keep in mind that building houses takes time, guys, right? Like,
Yeah.
well, at least a minimum of 18 months to 2 years.
Yeah.
And that's just a single housing. And if they have to consider all the apartments that they're planning to build, it's going to take 3-4 years. And where we are already in a crisis right now.
Yeah. And like, if you look at, every stat in terms of which industry is going bust the most, it's the construction industry. And man, everyone's saying, yeah, the builders are dodgy. Like, I don't know if they have done the comparison of Australian building industry compared to other countries out there. I wonder if these people actually have lived in other countries before. Like, look, I'm not a builder, but I know for a fact that when you go to another country, especially the Asian countries, and you've got a pram and you've got a kid and you trying to get up this, to level 20,
There's no lift.
There's no lift. There's also no ramps. Probably you have to pick up your baby and you pick up the pram as well. There's just none of those things, and the fire standards is ridiculous. Like, you probably die in those buildings if there was a fire. Whereas I think Australia's building standards are not
Very
too bad.
high. They're actually very high.
Yeah.
I was just discussing this with a mate of mine, and he's from Ireland, and it's like compared to Ireland, like the standards in the construction industry in Australia is really high.
Yeah, but obviously we know that things did happen with those apartments. Went all over the news, and I think because of that, as a result, it's caused a lot of impact and red tape for the building industry. But I do feel like, you got to give and take in.
Yeah, they need a bit of a break, like they've been hit too hard.
It's great to have those standards and really high, but the government also need to consider that they need to have enough resources to keep up with the standards then. There's no point keeping standards very high to go through all the thorough documents and stuff, and where all these departments don't have enough resources to take on the job.
The same thing happened with us when it came to JobKeeper and all these new COVID new rules that came out, the grants and all that stuff. We didn't have the resources to digest everything. They didn't also have the resources to implement the grant. And so it was just a whole, excuse my English, but shit show. It was literally during those times, during COVID, it was a shit show. No one knew what was going on. Clients were calling us. We were calling the ATO. The ATO didn't even know what was going on. They were just like, this is the first I've heard of this JobKeeper. I don't even know how it works. They didn't know how to do the tests, the eligibility requirements. No one had a clue. Yeah.
During COVID, the grants did keep businesses alive, but they weren't keeping production and value creation alive. Like, the businesses were still shut down. The factories were still shut down. Like, everything was still not moving. All that was moving is money. Money comes into a business, money flows to the staff, and then that's about it. And then the staff just keeps it in their, or spends it, I don't know.
So that's the problem, right? And I don't think anyone has noticed this, and that the fact that a lot of money got inputted into the economy, and then obviously a lot of money then got spent on, buying property at that time. Because let's just face it, COVID did drop the housing prices a small amount, and so then everyone, all right, let's buy our home.
And the interest rates were like 2.something%.
Yes,
at the point
exactly.
It's crazy.
So what happened was then the influx of money went into property, but then the builders, and I don't think it's their fault, but they just couldn't manage with the workflow, the amount of work, the high wages,
and materials were stuck in they couldn't ship materials from China. They couldn't ship materials from all these different countries.
And then within 1 to 2 years, interest rates tripled, right? So therefore, cost of living would have went up. Yeah, material prices would have went up, and their property costs would have went up as well. And as a result of that, that's why businesses are going bust. It's it makes sense why construction industry is going bust, and the construction industry can't build more homes. And I think there's no help for that. There's just no targeted help from the federal budget to help builders to build more. And I think that's what we're asking for, which is you stated that you want to build more homes, but you're not really helping the problem.
Yeah, you're not helping create the supply. Yeah.
Yeah, but enough crapping on the government. This is supposed to be a good thing and a bad thing. I guess they are doing something for cost of living. So what do you guys think of this? So the government is giving everyone that owns a property or is a household, so they're renting, a $300 rebate on their power bills. And they're also giving small businesses a $325 rebate on their power bills. Just so you know, it's a once-off payment. And it's not a payment, it's a rebate as well. So you don't get it. You don't physically get that money. you get a rebate in your electricity bill.
Yeah, once again, it's like a very small incentive, $300. It's almost meaningless, to be honest. And then the second thing is that it doesn't help the supply side. Once again, it's not really helping the problem. It's like similar with how they've dealt with the grants. It's just like applying a band-aid, but the thing is the wound is still there. You're not like helping to heal the wound.
Yeah, well, they don't take in consideration electricity prices. I'm pretty sure has increased more than over $300.
Well, I'm not going to complain, now
Yeah,
that
no,
winter's
still.
coming.
yeah, that's
It
true.
definitely helps.
Can afford to turn on my heater.
Personally, my opinion about it, I think it's a very, it hasn't been thought out. So just so you know, basically once the federal budget is done for this year, like it got released on the 14th of May, they already start working on the next one. So it goes for a whole year. And for them to kind of think about it and go, you know what, we're going to just give everyone a $300 rebate. Whereas the high income earners, I don't think they care about it. Like, what is $300 going to do for them? Like, some businesses, they're getting $320, for all businesses, they're getting $325. What's that going to do for them? Yeah, like what? $325 is not going to do anything for them, for small businesses. So to me, to be honest, I think this is a political stunt. And honestly, they should have, if they were to do this right, have it means tested, and that people that really need it and the low income earners should get more rather than $300. So should get $500 or $600, and the high income earners get zero. It makes more sense.
I agree to that, but I think the challenge they probably might have is allocating the resources again to see who are the low income earners and who are the low and middle income households.
Well, the Lamington, LMITO, which is the low to medium income tax offset, worked really well, right? Don't you think? They could have just done it in the tax returns.
Yeah,
right?
100%.
Yeah, it would have saved us a lot of time too.
Yeah,
because
and it's automated as well. It's very easy to
Yeah.
implement.
Yeah, I think-
requires no audits.
Yeah, they could have just did it in the tax returns. Tax refunds, everyone's going to expect more of a bigger tax refund as a result if you're alone.
Yeah, completely agree with that. Yeah, 100%.
Obviously, there are guys that can play around with their income, but still, they won't do it because they need disposable income in their personal name.
Yes.
So that's my thoughts about the electricity bills. I just thought that, it wasn't going to solve much. What they also did, because they knew that the housing crisis is affecting house prices, but also affecting rent. They're looking at increasing rental assistance. So they're increasing 10% from September this year of the Commonwealth rent assistance payment. That would impact about 1 million recipients already receiving the maximum rate. So they're jumping it up from, I think they're going up to $188 per fortnight. Current maximum payment for a single person receiving rent assistance is $188 per fortnight, and $125 for a single person in a shared house. So that's going to increase about $19 a fortnight for a single person. Yeah, what do you guys think about that?
I think the money that is spent there could be instead used to broaden the eligibility criteria instead of like helping the people already having the rental assistance, but rather broadening the people that is eligible to receive that rental assistance.
So you're saying increase the eligibility criteria
Yeah.
so that more people can have access to the fund.
That's my personal opinion.
I guess, not many people have that rental assistance. Well, they say that there's, how many did I say? 1 million recipients already. Honestly, any money is good money, but $19 a fortnight. How much did your rent increase by?
My rent increased by, not too much actually, because I managed to negotiate it down. I'm a chartered accountant. My rent increased by $40 a fortnight.
What's that in percentage wise?
That is, 6%, something like that.
6%.
Yeah,
But
6%.
on average, I believe a lot of people are getting
Yeah.
rent increase like
I got
$100
lucky.
a week.
I got
Yeah.
lucky. Yeah.
So $100 a week would be like $200.
Yeah, most people are getting
fortnight.
like $100
a week.
to $200 a
$100.
week. So I just don't think it's gonna do anything. But yes, I agree. If you go and give free money out like this, it's just gonna increase inflation rate as well. So I understand why they did it. It's just I don't know if this really is helping the cost of living. Yep. Okay. So that's one thing that's happening. Well, one thing I know for sure that would reduce inflation and reduce the cost of living and help the housing crisis is the government will set the cap for next year's financial year's permanent migration program at 185,000 places, with 132,200 of those places being allocated to skills stream, limiting more permanent places to people who fit Australia's longer term skills needs. Yes.
You already know what my opinion is on that, Davie. So I am an immigrant, and then I actually fit into one of those criteria. So I'm very happy about that. Not gonna lie. And I actually think that immigration wise, that's really good because they are actually, what they are doing is they're reducing, I think, like family migration and like increasing the skilled labor. And that's what's needed. It's like we need more skilled people in Australia to help increase GDP, help create more value in the society. We didn't need all these like generational wealth from families coming in and like, you know, purchasing like 5 properties with all their generation wealth. That it's like they have very low tax rates in Asia, right? So they have very little tax in Asia. They have all these like money that they've built up because they have so little tax, and then they take all this money, come to Australia tax free, and just spend it, right? And then after that, you know,
Everything goes up.
I guess normally that would be good because therefore it's good for the GDP. But right now we're having a housing crisis.
Yeah, housing crisis.
We
That's
have
right.
inflation, a high inflation, and as a result, if there's more money in the economy to spend more, then the housing prices and inflation will go up. So
I agree with Davie. Generally, it would be good when our country is very attractive for overseas investors.
Yeah.
Then it just makes the economy look very strong. But right now, all we need is to just making sure we have enough resources to keep up with all the jobs and all the shortages that we have. Then after all the shortages are under control, then the government can just focus again on increasing the economy.
yeah, and skilled labor is important because most industries are struggling with that. Like you know, construction industry, for example. Yeah, so
Accountant.
accountants. Well, yeah, we're struggling to find people as well. So yeah, if you're looking for a job and you're an accountant with many experiences, you should reach out to us. Okay, so one great thing that they're doing also, they're supporting women. I've noticed in this federal budget. So I believe they're paying up to a $5,000 payment for women fleeing violent relationships permanent in the budget now. So they're making that a important change. So I think the Morrison government also put that in place, but that was a trial. So they're making that permanent now. So they're spending up to $1 billion. So yeah, I'm not sure if we've ever encountered a company where we had to organize for one of those payments. A $5,000 payment for women that in violent relationships, which really helps. And did you know that I think the highest chances of any group, like any demographic to be homeless is women over 60 in Australia.
Wow.
Yeah, that the higher chances of them being homeless is like women over 60. And the reason
that's tough.
Yeah, and the reason being is because
they probably all work all their life looking after the family and not focusing on their own personal well-being. And when the marriage breaks down, a relationship breaks
their
down,
mental health goes down, and they don't have anyone to
and
rely
no
on.
one's gonna look after them.
Yeah, it's really sad. Like I learned that when I was having a catch up with a friend, and he told me that, and I was like, holy moly, like that is insane. So that's why I think this is really important. And partly one of the reasons why they're homeless is because they have a marriage breakdown, or they just don't have any savings. And that's where the government is also putting in place that paid parental leave moving forward would also have superannuation paid to them too, which is a big change. I'm surprised I never had it in the first place.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Like, it's good thing, it's great thing, but I'm like, oh, they should always have it from the beginning.
That's pretty much like, I can't believe they haven't had it, and pretty much the same thing I think about it as well. I guess that is the main things. What do you guys think about this federal government budget?
The last two things are great, having a super added into the parental leave, and then budgeting the 5,000 for violence, domestic.
Yeah, domestic violence. Yeah. What do you guys? Well, what do you think about the overall budget? Like apart from those, those two things.
We had a touch base on it. I think overall it wasn't very focused much on small businesses or economy so much. It sounds like they are just trying to make sure looking after all the crises that happening and trying to keep everything under control. And just because they are trying to cover a lot of areas, like giving an electricity rebate, giving a rental access, they're trying to touch base in a lot of small areas that is not creating a big impact in just one industry or one factor.
So the way that I see this budget is more like a spray and pray, where the government has looked at different policies and they're like, oh well, I like this policy, and this policy because it affects the most people and it makes us look really, really good.
Yeah, because there's federal elections happening next year. So
Exactly. So it seems like it's not really helping the supply side of things, because the number of business owners, in contrast to the number of just like employees and ordinary people, is very few, right? Like much lower. So they're not really helping that because it doesn't make them look good. But I think that's what the economy needs, because the economy needs businesses to create that value, and especially the construction industry needs a lot of help and support to create more affordable housing.
Yeah, I think like my point of view is that, like, one, I don't want to be a politician ever, because the decision's so bloody hard to make.
Yeah,
But
true.
Yeah, for me, it's just like it's a very double-edged sword that you have with the federal budget, right? If you give people money in times of need, normally it would help them with the cost of living. However, then that means that they will have more money to spend, and as a result, it would cause a upward pressure on the inflation, and then that's a bad thing. So it's like you gotta be able to be smart about your money and put it in the right places. And I think means testing and making sure that the money goes to people that really need it is the most important thing. And I think that should have been the focus in the federal budget. But I don't think that happened.
Yeah, but overall, I would say that, you know, Australia's financial system, tax systems, and even monetary policies, they're really good, like compared to a lot of different countries. Like I'm from Malaysia, like so.
Tell me about Malaysia and their policies. What happened to one of their funds that they're supposed to have?
Yeah.
Probably
it's
get
called
censored.
1MDB. So yeah, but overall, Australia is doing really, really well. And I think overall, Australia has this culture where we're not trying to be the richest country. We're not trying to exceed and be one of the major economies in the world. We're just like sort of like living and enjoying life, right? And that's what a lot of our budgets actually reflect, like making sure that, you know, everybody's rights are
and looked after.
looked after.
Yeah, and there was some, I missed it, but there was some things about the health system that they were doing, like they were making it cheaper and the prices wouldn't increase too much. But I didn't include that because it wasn't really tax related. But so they are doing a lot of things for health related that it's important. Yeah, I agree, 100%. There were a few more things I wanted to add. Sorry, you might have to redirect it back in because I forgot to put it in. There was a big deal about HEX.
Correct.
Yeah. So let me just bring up the HEX thing. Student debts. So that was student debts. Sorry, let me find it. Because I think this is an important thing that we need to talk about, student debts. Because I don't know if people actually understand what happened. So basically what happened was that with student debts, the government made a big deal about this, that they're gonna reduce the indexation rate of the student debts. So initially last year was like at 7.1%, and everyone kicked up a storm about it, saying that, well, wow, what the heck is going on? Why is it so high? But basically inflation was at 7.1%, so therefore our student debts were pegged against that inflation rate. So the government then decided that we're gonna reduce that rate to whichever is lower, the wage increase or the inflation rate. So in this case, the wage increase was only 3.2%. So they are now applying 3.2% on these debts.
And then they're backdating it, right?
Yeah, they're backdating it to last year. I don't know how that's going to work, honestly. Apparently people are going to get a refund or credit or something like that.
Probably on the tax return, they might see is like held debt credit.
Yeah, something like that. It's probably going to be a bit hard to work out, but we'll leave that to us accountants to work out. But yeah, what do you guys think? Do you think it's a good thing? It's going to help the economy? The government did say it was going to save like $3 billion student debt, $3 billion.
I think it's a good thing, and it should have been done like that from the beginning, and rather than just implementing like 7.1% in comparison to the inflation rate. Because when all these students got their loan, the government should already factor in the debt that they've handed out and lended to the economy, and they should already have in their mind of what the rate that is going to get returned.
Yeah, I agree with Molly in that sense, because the idea of HEX is that it helps people afford education, right? So if you're doing it retrospectively, then the people that at that point of time did not afford to get that loan still did not get an education. Whereas if you implemented it earlier, then those people would be like, oh, okay, I don't have to pay this indexation rate right now, so I actually can afford this education.
I guess no one makes a decision on studying based on HEX. I just want to point that out. And I think that this was used, my point of why I don't like this is because I think they used it as a political stunt, because this doesn't really change the amount of HEX you're going to have to repay back based on your income. Wherever you made $100,000, whether you made $80,000 or $150K, you still pay the same amount of HEX. This reduction and this $3 billion that they saved doesn't change that fact. So what I mean by that is that all they're doing is just reducing the debt. The HEX and help repayment threshold still stays the same. So if you made $100,000, you're still going to have to pay a lot of a portion of that back to reduce your HEX and help debt. And I think that the system of HEX and help is flawed a bit. I think the prices are probably too high for certain degrees that are really important for us. So for example, like nursing and being a doctor, or like teachers. I overheard a friend that had like $80,000 HEX debt, and he's a teacher, and teachers don't really want to be teachers anymore because one, it costs too much to be a teacher, and two, they don't get paid enough. And I think that's a flawed system, right? No one wants to become a teacher anymore. They're not really respected in Australia's economy. And so therefore we're going to lose all our teachers. And as a result, we're not going to get a good education anymore. Same thing with nursing. And I think that's the problem, right? They made it seem like this is such a big deal, but I don't think it is a big deal. Great, you reduced debt, but you didn't reduce debt. You just reduced the increase. That's all you did.
They just reduced the interest rate.
Yes, interest rate basically. They just reduced the interest rate. But they shouldn't even have that in the first place.
Yeah,
They
so
shouldn't
or
been
just have the
7.1.
flat rate, interest rate from the very beginning.
Yeah. But they kicked up a storm thinking that it's a big deal. And that's why I was just like, is it really a big deal? You shouldn't make it seem like it's a big deal, because for people that don't really understand HEX, which most people don't, we all know that no one understands HEX. Like there's not enough education about HEX. So people are going, great team members. I don't know. No, actually, let's start that game. Well, guys, that was a great, lovely conversation about the federal budget with obviously Molly, the one and only, and Sean, the superstar. And of course, me, Davie Mack, your friendly neighborhood taxman. We'll see you guys next time.